Well, it's kind of made me chuckle. And you guys, if you're listeners, you know that last week we got into the issue, and we've covered this a few times, the issue of technology, social media, the impact it's having on our society and our kids, and particularly the impact of smartphones in schools. We did an interview last week with an educationalist leader, and we said, what about banning smartphones in schools? And what we found out, and also from the feedback we got from you, is that an awful lot of schools already do effectively ban cell phones during class time in their schools, and they all think it's a good idea. And the educational professional, Ms. Otane, who talked to us, also said it was a good idea, though she came to the conclusion that because the practice of banning the phones was widespread and a decision for boards and staff of individual schools, there probably wasn't the need for a nationwide official ban of the cell phones. And really, it was just common sense. It was just common sense. If you go to school, you go to learn, and if you're doing your Tinder or your Twitter or your Grindr or your Instagram or anything else, you're not learning. Also, we made reference to, and I'm hoping we might try and hunt him down and get him on next week, reference to the work of Professor Jonathan Haidt and others in the United States. Very robust academic work, which shows correlations, particularly with eating and self-esteem disorders in young people, a correlation between the cell phone generation, those who started using smartphones in school and education, and he says it's had massive and mostly negative impacts, not just on American academia, but also on the mental well-being of young people. So, look, I thought when the Nats came out of this, it was a bit of a no-brainer, and most New Zealanders were going to agree with it. The funny thing is, the reaction from the left, from lefty teachers, from trolls, lefty trolls like Clint Smith on Twitter, has been so disproportionate that it kind of beggars belief. We had some teacher coming out saying, they're killing kids with the ban on cell phones. A guy called Clint Smith says, my son, he had to wait for 10 minutes today without his phone or something. So, for some reason, this is a hill that the woke left have decided to die on. What's behind the policy in real terms? And are the Nats who proposed the ban surprised at the level of response it's got? We're joined now by National's education spokesperson or shadow minister or whatever they call it, Erica Stanford MP. Erica, welcome to the platform.
G'day, mate. I live my life in the shadows, you know that?
Hey, boy, this kicked off, didn't it?
So it's a good start of the morning. How are you?
Good. This really has gone, the other lot have gone ballistic over this, haven't they?
They have. I didn't quite think that they would be this opposed to it. As you've already mentioned in your sort of preamble, it's good practice. The international evidence is there. Many schools are doing it already, and we're seeing the results not only here in New Zealand but around the world. So it really is a no-brainer. You know, we are a party for academic achievement, for progression, and for well-being at school. And if you want those things, the evidence now is pretty overwhelming that kids' addiction to social media has to be addressed.
Yeah, and I guess, Erica, that I was thinking this morning, prepping for this interview, it's not the phone that's being banned, it's the smartphone that creates the dopamine obsession or addiction and the social media rubbish that we see with people posting ram raids on TikTok. It's just a little step to try and not get back to some sort of normal, but to ameliorate the harm and the clearly proven harm that social media and, digital addiction can cause.
You're right. It's less about the device and it's more about the what's on the device, the content, the social media, that constant addiction to what's being said in the thread and what's playing on TikTok. I've got teenagers myself, one almost teenager and one 15, nearly 16-year-old, and I deal with it every single day. I know what it's like. And look, the state have a duty of care for 6 hours a day to look after our nation's children, to make sure that they have every chance of academic success and that they're mentally well. And we now know that there is a big link between your mental health and your well-being and your academic performance. Now, when the government has your children for 6 hours a day, they have a duty of care to ensure that you are getting the very best education and that your mental health is looked after. And all the evidence shows now that the way to go about doing that is a small part of that is to ensure that kids are interacting with each other at lunchtime, that they're more active and physically running around at lunchtime and talking to each other and interacting and concentrating in class. If that means saying, hey, for 6 hours a day, your cell phone is off and away all day so that you can concentrate on those things, then the government has a duty of care to do that.
Erica, given to be honest, that a lot of schools are already doing it. When we covered this last week, we had a whole lot of people ring in saying, my kids' schools have done it, it's really good. And really, I was surprised at the number of schools who had implemented it. And we covered the story in response to what's happening in Australia. Do you think, honestly, that a ban is necessary if this is the trend that school boards and school management are heading towards anyway? Or do you think, and I'm also wondering, are we going to have phone police running around schools, or is it kind of a policy that gives a steer and makes it easier for schools to do this?
Well, there's two parts to your question there, and the first part is around schools already doing it. And look, I know that because I've been around so many schools in the last couple of years visiting teachers and principals and students, and I'm really pleased to see the amazing results that are coming out of the actions that schools are taking. They're experiencing less bullying, less anxiety. And in today's world, our kids are experiencing so much more anxiety than they used to be, especially our young girls. And they're witnessing increased performance. So we've seen this here, we've seen it overseas, but we want this for all of our kids, especially when all the evidence shows that that the best results we see are actually for our vulnerable kids and in vulnerable situations and our underperformers. They are the ones who benefit from a cell phone free policy the very most. And as you know well, Sean, we have in the OECD we have the worst statistics between academic performance and socioeconomic status. So if that is what your parents do, right? So if we can take this small step to make sure that our most vulnerable kids are getting the benefit of it, then we should do that. And look, the point is it's quite variable across the country. You've got some schools who allow it at lunchtimes and some don't. I was just reading a lot of research around schools like Glendowie College, Waiuku, Hillmorton and Christchurch, who have all taken the additional step of banning the phone the whole day. So their expectation is 8:30 till 3:30.
And I actually misread that yesterday morning. I thought you were going to let them have them at what we used to call playtime and lunchtime. But that's actually the time when getting kids off their phone in terms of socialising them would be most productive.
The most important.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. A lot of it's about academic achievement, and Christopher Luxon talked a lot yesterday about the links to academic achievement. The second part of this is emotional and social well-being and interacting with the people who are in front of you.
And that's the stuff Professor Haight has written about in the United States, just the impact that these devices have had on a generation now of young Americans.
Exactly, and no parent wants their kid to be on TikTok all the time. You know, that we send our kids to school to have healthy relationships and interact with each other and join clubs and do debating. Yeah. Well, like me, the geek at school, but, join a sport team if you like, or whatever, or do something that has positive human interaction and not, sitting staring on your phone. Parents have a hard enough time, because I do with my kids, getting them off their devices when they're at home and on the weekends. Having 6 hours free from that a day to interact and have healthy relationships, we know has a knock-on effect to academic performance as well.
Yeah. I note, though, that some in the teaching profession and unions are just, they're clutching their pearls quite hard. Papatoetoi's high school principal, Vaughan Colley, almost, I think, moved to tears on the AM show yesterday. You terrible woman, Erica. You're going to cost kids' lives and you're not interested in vaping. I think vaping's already banned at schools, isn't it?
Look at it, and we're going to have more to say about that in the future. But look, Vaughan is a wonderful principal, and I talk to him quite a lot. I consider him a good friend. And look, he's got his own views, but there are principals with other views. We had social media posts by Patrick Drum at Mount Albert saying that he absolutely welcomed the support and he could see the benefits of this, and so many other principals we spoke to said, this is backing us up. You guys are now the bad guys and not us. And I'm quite happy to be the bad guy, Sean. Very happy to be that.
I guess you take that. Okay, you take the heat.
I'm used to it.
Would it cost a lot, though? Are you going to set up monitoring, or just a line and an education department guidelines for schools, and you encourage it to be done? Is it going to cost a lot of money that could be spent elsewhere?
It's not going to cost any money at all. There is nothing tagged to this. It is support for schools. It's setting an expectation with schools that cell phones will be off and away all day to support the things we talked about earlier, academic achievement, progress and well-being. So it doesn't have millions of dollars attached to it.
And you're not sending kids to boot camps, military-style camps, if they have their phone out at school. Oh, we lost her. We lost the line. Happens. Maybe she was on a cell phone. Maybe she got banned from using her cell phone. I'd really like some calls on this today too. I found it almost humorous. Are we back? Were you back? We got it back? Don't know what happened there. Someone banned your cell phone, Erica.
Clearly, there's a blocker going on.
Okay, look, let's just work through what the policy is, and that is: are you allowed to bring a cell phone to school?
Yes, you can, as long as it is off and away all day, and we recognise that children need it for health purposes. In the occasional class, they may need it for educational purposes, and there will be, teachers can make that judgment. But also, kids will need it for after-school activities and catching the bus, and my kids will still be taking their phones to school.
Right. And after school, when the bell goes and they're heading to the gate, they can turn their phone on?
Absolutely.
All right, that's good to know. There'd be dispensations for kids with medical or other conditions that required them to be monitoring something like diabetes with their phone or be contactable by their parents?
Yes, absolutely, of course.
All right. So we wouldn't have, for example, Clint Smith's kid getting stuck, slightly autistic, I think is what Clint said, for 10 minutes, not knowing what to do after school. That's actually not a realistic scenario under this policy.
No, not at all. And look, we know these days that parents want to be able to contact their children outside of school hours when they're catching the bus or they're coming home. That's why my children have phones when they started catching the bus. But my expectation is that they will be off and away all day. There's no need for your phone during the day when you're in school and at lunchtime and morning tea, unless it's for health reasons.
Look, I think in some ways, we've had years now of the helicopter parent syndrome. Which has bred resilience and independence out of our kids because we've had millennial parents who are clutching their pearls all the time. This could have all sorts of positive impacts, I'm thinking, in all sorts of ways.
Well, we've seen that from the schools who've already imposed it all day. As say Helmorton, Glendale and Waiuku have said all sorts of things like, kids are no longer glued to their phones all lunchtime. They're watching student interaction increase. The classroom culture has changed. I know that Wellington Girls did it recently, not all day but in class, and they had almost instant results after a bit of grumbling from the kids, and then they quickly realised how good the ban was for their academic achievement and their mental well-being.
Erica, did you have a phone at school?
No, I'm not too old. I don't even think
we had one phone at school. It was in the office, and it was a big Bakelite thing with a rotary dial on it. Oh, no, it wasn't quite that bad by the time I got to college. Why do you think then?
They had the little Alcatels.
Okay, look, I don't think this is a radical policy at all. It sounds like common sense. It's not going to be enforced with stormtroopers. It sounds to me like you realistically expect that there will be, if you like, on the spot, local environmental decisions made about how this rolls out and how it works, so it's not really nanny state stuff. Why do you think, though, the left have jumped on it?
Well, I guess that's just politics for you. I mean, Labor haven't really rolled out a lot of policy, and our education policy so far has all been well-researched, evidence-based, and it is picking up on the most important things. We've talked about curriculum and assessments and making sure kids are on track and supporting our teachers and straightforward stuff. And I think that the left are really struggling in education. Our results in literacy and numeracy are, as you know, through the floor. We have a burning platform there. And this government have done nothing in 6 years. Their eye has been completely off the ball. And that was up to Chris Hipkins. He had the portfolio. So I know they're struggling, and so anything we do in education, I think you will expect a very swift reaction from them on, mostly because they just don't have any of their own ideas, because when was the last time you saw them put out any decent education policy? Never.
What's the priority on this? Is this like a first 100 days you're going to be waving the flag on the school phone ban? or not?
Look, it's something that can be implemented relatively quickly. We will we will do some. I'll talk to schools over the next little while.
You're talking as if you're going to be in government. What would your likely coalition partners say about the ban? Do you know if ACT are into it?
Well, look, as you know, we're just focused on getting our party vote up and our policies and our strategies, and not what ACT are doing at the moment.
All right, and you haven't had any blowback from the mobile companies themselves, who I imagine will lose a bit of traffic and a bit of dough out of this.
That's probably why they cut me off before. No.
Oh, don't go conspiracy theory on me, Erica, please.
Not on your station. No.
As I say, I just think it's very humorous. And the day that we were waiting for details of the BlackRock $2 billion deal, that, this is the issue. This is the hill that Labor and its supporters choose to die on.
Well, they chose to die on the not allowing parents to take their maternity leave at the same time as well. Very weird hill to die on that are very popular and sensible policies that Kiwis want. Yeah. And yet, they're just not.
Apart from the craziness and the hysteria being promoted in legacy media, what sort of feedback have you had to the announcement?
Really positive, actually. We've had a little bit of a misunderstanding because the media haven't been reporting it exactly 100%, but as soon as parents realise, actually, no, they can still have their phone after school, that's fine. They say to me, I've had so many emails to say, thank goodness, we already struggle with our children during the day and at night, and this is just an extra step that means that they're free and they can concentrate on their learning. So parents overwhelmingly have been really supportive of this, and I think you've probably seen some of the in the Herald
and we're getting feedback here that is very positive too from our audience.
And look, all of the principals that I went to and said, hey, look, this is what we're thinking about. What do you think? They were very supportive. Yeah. They're trying their very best under difficult circumstances. And they said to me, Erica, if we had the support of the government, that we could say to our kids, look, this is not us.
As I say, I think it just feeds into a general trend. Just one other thing. The teachers look like they've settled their pay dispute. That's going to feed through the rest of the industry, the post-primary. That's got to be a good thing.
It is. I mean, my daughter was one of the ones affected by the strikes after we had COVID and lockdowns and floods and all sorts of other things. Having an extra day off every week for weeks on end was not helpful for her academic achievement. So for all of those kids out there who are now back in class every day, it's a good result.
Do you think that they settled because they saw you guys coming and thought this is the best deal we're going to get for the next 3 years?
I'm not sure that that's fair, but I'm not sure what. I think they settled because it was a fair deal. Yeah. And they all wanted. I think teachers were over the student disruption as well because they saw the effects of it.
Okay, last question, and I'm serious about this one. One of the angles that I do agree with that's been taken by mainstream media, and there were pictures on the telly last night. You got to lead by example, Erica Stanford. And I can remember, I'm just remembering back to an interview I did in a studio at, I think, Radio Live or Magic Talk with Chloe Schwabrick. I was doing a panel discussion with her and she had her phone out in the middle of it and I stopped the whole thing. And I said, put your bloody phone away. That is just rude. And she looked kind of bewildered by it, but it was a millennial attitude, but she did put the phone away. You guys sitting in the debating chamber, and gosh, they even had a picture of the speaker on his phone, on your bloody devices. Now, you are meant to be paying attention to the words of wisdom coming from the mouths of your colleagues and compatriots. You are meant to be running the bloody country, and it's way more important than learning, fifth form science or maths or whatever, or whatever it is. So why don't you guys lead by example? Why don't you make a movement for the banning of the use of cell phones and mobile devices within the debating chamber at Parliament?
Well, most of the time when we're on our phones, well, I know for me anyway, I'm sitting there talking to my researchers and my policy advisors who are saying to me...
Then go to the office and talk to them, Erica. You're in the debating chamber.
I'm not allowed out of the debating. I'm not allowed out of the debating chamber. That's the thing.
That's why you've got messengers who bring in little notes to you.
Not from my office, though. So my staff are sitting upstairs in their office watching the TV, watching Question Time, going, you should ask this, you should say this. So quite a lot of the time, I'm actually just using it as for work purposes. If you're sitting there scrolling social media, you should probably think again. But to be fair to us, there is a use of our phones for us communicating especially with our researchers and our advisors and our officers who are saying to us, hey...
How do I know you're not playing Candy Crush?
I haven't played Candy Crush in years, Sean. I'm a Boggle girl.
Okay. I'm a Wordle. I got the Wordle out in 3 this morning. But look, come on, it's not a good look, you guys on your phones in the debating chamber. And I really do think that leading by example and showing kids that you can do it might be a good thing to do.
Well, it's certainly worth considering.
Okay, then there's the question. Will you consider or will you raise, and I don't want to know, is it the House Committee or something, are you prepared to float the idea of a ban on cell phone use in the debating chamber?
Well, it would have to be a ban on playing games, because we do need to be able to communicate with our researchers. It is really
I don't know.
important.
I can remember covering Parliament, over the last 40 years, and everyone, it seemed to run without people on cell phones.
We probably weren't as effective as we once were, though.
All right.
Well,
that's highly a debatable point. I'm just pointing out, I think that is, as a criticism of this policy, it's a good one.
When I'm sitting there preparing for a debate, I'm like, oh, God, there was that thing I read in the paper, there's that really good line, or there's that bit of research. Quite often will look it up, add it into my speech at the last minute. So there are
you should be better prepared.
You shouldn't be scrolling social media.
Prepared. That's like cramming before an exam. Erica, I thank you very much.
Quite often you walk in.
I thank you very much for your time this morning. I think it's been one of the most curious political stories of the campaign so far. But I do think that generally public opinion seems to be with you on this, despite the hysteria and outrage of the left. Thanks for your time. Erica Stanford, National MP, Shadow Minister of Education or Education spokesperson. And I do think, I'm sorry, hypocrites on the phone thing. If you're in the debating chamber, that you go to the debating chamber to debate, not to do your office admin. And if you're not prepared for the speech and you haven't got enough in your head without asking someone on 120 grand up in the office if you should say this or say that, you shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be an MP. So I'm saying I'm calling on all political parties to limit the use of cell phones in the debating chamber. And the Speaker most certainly should not be using his cell phone in the chamber. They actually employ retirees, little men in green suits. They're called the messengers. You're doing them out of a job. They can run around with little bits of paper feeling important.